your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Never believe fully in anybody else's BS. I don't care if it's Roger Nish, the Pope, L. Ron Hubbard, Al Gore, George Bush, or I don't care who it is. Don't swallow all their belief system totally. Don't accept all of their bullshit, all their BS. The second rule is like unto the first. Don't believe totally in your own BS, which means that, as Bucky Fuller said, the universe consists of non-simultaneously apprehended events. Non-simultaneously. The universe consists of non-simultaneously apprehended events, which means any belief system or reality tunnel you've got right now is going to have to be revised and updated as you continue to apprehend new events later in time, not simultaneously. This is the natural functioning of the human brain. It's the way children's brains perform before they're wrecked by the school system. It's the way the minds of all great scientists and artists work. But once you have a belief system, everything that comes in either gets ignored if it doesn't fit the belief system, or it gets distorted enough so that it can fit into the belief system. You got to be continually revising your map of the world.
Catching a Ride.
Yeah, it is.
It's a classic.
Yeah.
Have you ever read it?
Yeah, I've never read it.
Never?
No, I haven't. I've never read it.
Catch.
I never.
Well, hello, world. You're on Untold Radio. And we're the Australian aspect of Untold Radio. We're broadcasting from Sydney, Australia. My name's Jane Katz.
And I'm Aspasia.
And we're very excited to introduce what we assume to be one of the most controversial, ambiguous, and insane episodes we've ever done. Episode 83, J D Salinger writes a grimoire to catch a phony in the rye. What does that mean? We'll try and even just unravel that title.
This is a really huge, and it can be very convoluted, and there's a lot of rabbit holes that we could go down into, but we're not
going to go as deep as one could. But we're putting it out there to cherry pick and for you to get some ideas to follow up on research. And nothing we state is definitive. You heard the incredible Robert Anton Wilson there. God rest his soul. We are evoking what Robert did all the time, which is Orr's law. Orr's law is that delusional state we get into mentally when the prover proves what the thinker thinks. So do not take anything we're stating here today as gospel, because it's always that rabbit hole of like, I've got evidence to back it up. But is that evidence part of the corruption of the information we've got, because that evidence is based more on who I am?
So this catcher in the rye has always come up in all the...
It's fascinated us.
Absolutely. It was just such a weird thing, wasn't it? There's so many... the way, you know, that this writer, that's his only novel that he's ever written.
Wrote many short stories.
Lots of short stories, but only novel that he ever published. He didn't publish anything after it, like any novels after it.
He was really had a difficult time getting published initially.
He was,
had a difficult time after.
That's right.
And then shut down in 65, never to publish again. And the most absurd thing, what writer doesn't need an audience to read their book?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's what you write for.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because we should state that we are broadcasting
we are
on sacred and stolen land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and we wish to acknowledge and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging.
Yes, we do.
We also need to state that one of the greatest people we've ever had in chat passed away recently. We never made this statement. Uncle Bones too.
Well, we were going. Haven't heard from Uncle Bones. For
we were worried.
Weeks,
we were worried
because we hadn't seen. He was always one of the first people in the chat room,
Catherine
and
J, Carolyn
Yeah.
Four Feathers,
yeah.
but Uncle Bones was always there and always so polite
absolutely
and supportive
Very
and giving
supportive.
of every
Yeah,
podcast on
yeah.
the station.
Yeah.
And so our heart goes out to his family,
Mm-hmm.
his friends, everyone that loved him in the chat.
Yeah.
And Uncle Bones, your spirit will be with us forever. You actually
sure.
made us feel welcome, because I still feel like we're the new kids on the block. The tyranny of distance
don't.
here. You don't? I still feel like people are getting used to us,
well, no one. You know what? Once they get used to us, it's over.
It is over.
That's my thing. Once
We
they
do
can
have
predict
to
you, you're done.
at least make note too, and we won't be able to go through all the names, but the great wrench people we have now.
Yes.
John Ayres has led the path with the flaming torch
Yes, he
out
has.
of the soul mines, and Laurie and Catherine Four Feathers,
Mhm.
Catherine J.
Mm.
Incredible
I've
amount
never
of
been-
moderators.
Absolutely, but
That's
I've never
the
been
sweetest.
able to look at pink Himalayan pink salt again the same
Oh
way.
no, it's ruined that.
It's
but
over.
what wasn't that a delusion? Up there with Catcher in the Rye, I think.
I actually
in many ways.
I actually didn't think it was, from the Himalayan mountains, but advertising works. So
Now,
there
you
you
need to go back through our podcast and actually check out that great episode with John Ayres to find out the truth about Himalayan pink salt. But we
yes.
are digressing badly.
We are.
Let's digress for one more second. We had an epiphanous moment, and occasionally we've actually now slipped into doing private little film nights for ourselves, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
And we had a beautiful date
Oh,
night the other night.
We did.
And look, a lot of people are initially going to look at this trailer,
Mhm.
and a lot of researchers into the field of the parallel hominid
Mhm.
might be upset. But it is an entire feature film,
Yeah.
and you cannot judge it by the trailer.
No, you
The
can't.
trailer makes you feel like we could be looking at Harry and the Hendersons 3.
But it's not.
But it's not.
No.
It's actually an extraordinary film that follows the life of a family of Sasquatch, 4 of them,
Yeah.
and their nomadic journey throughout the seasons of the year.
That's right. That's right.
And it is full of sort of humor,
Lots of humor.
a bit of sort of sexual interplay, so be careful with the children around, but nothing too explicit. Absurd.
Oh, no. We think it's absurd. They're just having sex.
Yeah,
As they would,
but there is
but-
something just like David Lowery's ghost story.
Yes.
In the late, I think that was 2017 or something, that film
that it
came
was
out,
done,
and
yeah.
I actually watched it on a cruise ship and was so affected by it, because I felt someone that has written this film understands the whole poltergeist spectral world
Yes.
in a very emotional way.
Absolutely.
And at the end of this, Sasquatch Sunset,
Hmm.
which is out on all streaming services, and please support these maverick independent filmmakers that made this film.
Mm.
I had this strong feeling that these people knew a lot more about the Sasquatch, Bigfoot,
Yeah.
Yowie, Yeti equation
Yeah.
that meets the eye through the trailer. But
For sure.
let's have a tiny
quick
peek
look
at their trailer just to lure you to go and support
Yeah.
and have a look at this film. And don't blame us if you step into hot water.
Okay.
Now that's incredible. And you know what? Oddly enough,
It's hilarious because he's doing like the ape thing, picking, looking for all sorts of parasites and fleas and whatnot. And he just sneezes on the back of his head.
something that happens.
And
to
some
all of us.
moments in it, they are so, you think that they're like animals, it's an animal that you're looking at. And then all of a sudden they do something that is so human.
Yeah.
And it sort of jars.
There's a
you
great
little bit. It was just such
sensitivity
an
in this film.
amazing film.
And you know what? The astounding thing, like Themrock, there is literally no human
No,
dialogue
well, there's no dialogue
whatsoever.
in that. Of course, there
is a
be.
moment where a little piece of music appears, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I just think it is a remarkable film.
Yeah.
Do not judge a film by its trailer. You may get fuming with us, but hey, don't shoot the messenger.
No, go, look, if you think it's very funny and it's very poignant and it's very touching and moving. It's all those things, but
All right, let's try and tackle this extraordinary equation. Can you go to the stills?
So why are we tackling it? Let's just tell people why we're tackling it. We're tackling it because this thing has cropped, this book, Catcher in the Rye, has cropped up in lots of
just put that image there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of scenarios.
That's the original cover that J D Salinger wanted no images and wanted the gold and the red. So I want you to hold that color in your head. And what we have to do at the very beginning of this podcast, J D Salinger writes a grimoire, which is a spell, a book of spells to catch a phony in the rye. Who is the phony in the rye? Because the protagonist, Holden Caulfield, is literally raining down hell on the phony world that he considers to be adults.
Which is the adult world.
He's at that transitional point in his adolescence between 16 and 17 where he's going to have to embrace that world that he sees as such a construct.
Can we say right here that at the time when this book came out, was written and came out 1951, it was just after the Second World War.
Yeah.
And teenagers were actually not a thing yet.
They were just beginning,
but they weren't.
They weren't their own entity. They were no longer children.
You were either back then. You were either a child or an adult. There was no transitional period. But because of the war, and all the able-bodied men had gone off to fight, the only people left behind to run the country. Work in the factories, work in the fields, do what needed to be done to feed the population that was left at home, was to go to work. And so it was women and teenagers.
That's right.
Well, teenagers that weren't old enough to go to war, but weren't, little children either. So they were, given the opportunity to go to work in factories and start earning money,
get a disposable income for the first time.
So they weren't trying to feed a family or save for a home.
And we won the Second World War, the war to end all wars.
That's right. So there was this whole new economic group of people that had emerged. We were going
into the future.
Well, sorry?
We were going into the future in a big way. Cars were turning into rocket ships. Form had taken over any function.
So you've got this group of people now, the teenagers, that have got this disposable income. What are you going to do? How are you going to get the money out of them? So what you do is you start making films for them, making music for them, selling them records and selling them stuff that they don't really need. But there's this whole new economic group there that can be exploited for the cash. You know what I mean? So hence the emergence of the teenager, and this book, The Catcher in the Rye, came out at that time.
But the odd thing about this book is this is not a teenager embracing the free market.
Oh, God, no.
And the democratic capitalist corporatocracy.
No, he's railing against it.
This one, and he's railing against it from inside an institution which it appears that he's had a breakdown. Holden Caulfield is a very complex, dysfunctional, meandering stream of consciousness.
Absolutely.
Now, we do have to acknowledge at the start of here an incredible author, a remarkable astrologer, a crime reporter, and someone I only learned about in researching this case at the very last minute. And here is the zeitgeist, that the program, The Occult Rejects, Nick, the mad scientist, what a beautiful, astounding researcher she is, and so knowledgeable, had on this guest, BD Solano. And is that how I pronounce her name? I'm pretty sure it is. And we
Salerno.
Yes, we have to acknowledge her work. Go to the Occult Rejects.
Yes.
And you know what? Everything needs to be cherry picked. There are certain issues in there that I don't necessarily agree with.
Of course
Lots
not.
of people have problems with astrology and
hence,
charts.
Hence the disclaimers.
Yeah. And it's all alleged stuff, but you need to cherry pick it.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, BD Solano is one of the most meticulous researchers.
Yes.
And we've actually been very inspired and touched by her material because she's the only one that's pushed, as far as we can find out there, and I'm sure that's very limited.
Yeah.
But she has really pushed the information. I guess the other person we cherry pick from, not necessarily agree with entirely, is William Ramsey. He's another inspiration. Dana, all those people are an inspiration.
Rotting Jules.
And you have to be careful the way you go around picking this stuff. But let's actually go back to this time of 1951 and have a look at, go to the top there, and let's look at the color scheme for the poster of Rebel Without a Cause.
Right,
This was 4 years before Nicholas Ray's incredible film that captured, in a way, the zeitgeist of our protagonist, Holden Caulfield, in...
Before or after?
After, darling. 4 years after.
No, you said 4 years before. Yeah.
4 years before was the book.
Yes, in 51.
That's
so
what I was stating.
In 50,
so this
55.
captured that same despondent,
absolutely
rebellious...
The rebel, that teenager.
Well, now, in a way, it's so odd that the country actually embraced this stuff.
Right.
So underneath this, all of a sudden, world that was supposedly never going to see another war like that again. Affluence and disposable incomes were building. The teenager was getting an identity. Out comes the rebellious teenager who's actually showing it doesn't matter how much freedom I've got. It doesn't matter how much money I've got. I haven't got the love of the family unit. That's crumbling. And I'm very cynical about authority and all those sorts of things. So what we are doing is we're approaching this book from the fact that we feel allegorically, metaphorically, maybe even realistically, that J D Salinger was casting a spell. That's why we've called it a grimoire. And a grimoire is a book of magic. It's a spell book. And historically, the notion of a grimoire goes back thousands of years. And in the case of books, it is believed that these books themselves are imbued with magical power.
Right.
Now, the way it was embraced by the population ended up on the school syllabus.
Oh, my God. It was
but ironically
reading.
And paradoxically, it was
then banned.
It was banned and banned in the most extreme way. So just move on to the next. We've still got...
It actually changed the way, books were being written too, because
totally, this was revolutionary. It was groundbreaking. Stream of consciousness, meandering, insane, and very rhythmic. And so many words at the time were outrageous words like "goddamn" and there was blasphemy and all that. But those words were repeated literally tens to hundreds of times. And in a way, it starts to make you think about cognizant programming and stuff like that. And lots of academic philosophers and people that have analyzed this book have said it gets in your head.
It does.
It's like a flowing river. You can't get rid of it. You actually feel like it's changing you. Could this be I'm not saying it is, but could it be an extraordinary piece of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming? And, it has been cited in numerous murders, assassinations, as a primer, a trigger for the sleeper assassin.
Yes.
And in that regard, that's where the NLP steps in.
It's been flagged so many times in so many different cases.
But as you'll see there, I just want people to keep in mind one of the salient points that B.D. Salado on the Occult Rejects told us about. Go back up, and that is the color scheme we are looking at is, we're talking about post-Second World War. What is this color scheme? Well, I mean, if you go to that image of the catcher, and you'll see it there in that second day bill as well. You've still got the red and the yellow. What is that? That is the colours of the communist flag.
The communist flag,
which would be really inciting.
Well, it's really
when you think about it.
Quite pronounced there,
All right, and I mean. This book was so red hot in the time that they started to put like light warnings on it. So have a look at this one.
Okay.
Now, J D Salinger does appear to have cast a spell over the US and the rest of the world in 1951 with the publishing of this fictional, and he's erred to it. He's inferred.
Mm.
It's literally an autobiography.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the publishing of this, so that was its original color in cover. It caused shockwaves and became a runaway bestseller. This went through the roof. It now still sells around 250,000 copies a year.
Yeah.
I think it's up to about 60, 70 million. On Wikipedia, they say it's only sold 10 million.
No.
But so you can see then when people reacted to just that bare cover, that they actually started to bring in images of Holden, like Phoebe there at the carousel, the rye, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It was 4 years before Rebel Without a Cause.
Yeah.
And our protagonist, Holden Caulfield, resembles, actually, oddly enough, Jimmy Stark, James Dean's character
Rebel Without a Cause.
Yeah. It was the first time, as we spoke before, that teenagers had a voice and a disposable income. The future was here. We all identified with this angst-ridden, cynical teenager directly after the victory of the war that still just throws me completely awry. You know, he would become a teenage icon. And this book is still on the top 100 lists. It was the most school syllabuses, but paradoxically became the most censored book in high schools and libraries in the United States. Some allege that the book itself, and isn't this interesting? When you think of the color scheme, some allege that this book itself was a communist plot to undermine America.
Why would somebody in the school system, in the school syllabus, put this book up for teenagers, you know, to read? When it was this belligerent, you know, this kid railing against the you know, authority and saying that they're all fake, they're not real, and that we shouldn't be listening to them. Why would they?
It's strange, isn't it?
It's very, very bizarre.
Let's start at the very beginning.
Well, I think it's bizarre. I always thought it was a very strange thing.
Let's start at the beginning, Aspasia.
Yes.
With the title.
Oh, right, yes.
I mean, this
the
is
catcher in the rye.
What is a catcher in the rye?
Well,
according to Holden Caulfield, a catcher in the rye is the odd man out in the rye.
Right.
And you know that rye actually grows to an incredibly tall length.
Yes, yeah.
And the children are running around playing in the rye, but right next to that rye is a massive cliff face.
Yeah.
And if they don't realize it, they will go over. Holden Caulfield, all he wants to do in life, isn't this an odd motivation for success in 20th century America post-war? He wants to be the person in the rye that saves the youngsters.
Doesn't let them go over
the cliff.
Okay.
But you know what the odd thing is?
Who's going to stop him from going over the cliff?
He misheard, he misread, he misunderstood the lyrics from a Robert Burns song from 1782.
Right.
When a body catches a body coming through the rye.
Right.
So the song Coming Through the Rye is not even what Holden is espousing. He misheard it and interpreted that he would be that catcher. Now, lots of people said allegorically he is saving them from the torture of adulthood, the fakery, the phoniness of adulthood.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But what we're actually imposing here in the way that we see this is the ultimate phony might have been J D Salinger.
Well,
now, with all respect to his living children, of which one of them is supposedly Matt, going to be releasing a bevy of literature that Holden, that J D Salinger was working on, stopped publishing anything in 1965.
Yeah.
As I've said before, that is one of the biggest red flags you could imagine. But what is going on with this title?
I don't know.
How weird is this title? It feels like Project Monarch.
It does.
It feels like some form of weird entrapment. So tell us about the rye, Aspasia. The rye back then in the 1800s. What was happening in the rye was literally lovers' lane.
Well, that's where that people used to go and make out.
And that's what I assume that the Robert Burns song is about.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is a strange sort of reference in there to the sexual aspects of hiding yourself in the rye. And so what's happening? Are children running into the rye and witnessing something they shouldn't know about? Which is like children on phones today.
Maybe confronting. They're seeing what's going to happen to them in the future. I don't know what. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a real weird one, isn't it?
It's totally
That is
bizarre.
taken-
that it's such a surreal
That is
title.
taken that.
And you know what? When I ask people about that, when I ask people
yeah.
about that title, they go, "I've never considered it."
No, I mean,
why wouldn't you consider this book that has resonated and still resonates today? Why wouldn't you consider the surreal, allegorical nature of such an odd title, a misreading of that?
He misread it and turned it into something totally different. But it's this book has also become a catalyst for quite a few shooters, people who've killed other people, and the book The Catcher in the Rye was in their possession at the time and played a major role in that whole scenario. That when you look at it too, the rye grows a fungus on it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting fungus.
That they were able to extract LSD 25 from it, which then became a huge thing. That
it was the beginning
CIA,
of MK Ultra.
That's right.
It was all that stuff.
The CIA was then testing to see if they could mind control people with this LSD 25. So
one of the books that might assist you with that is the extraordinary early William Sargent's Battle for the Mind, the mechanics of indoctrination, brainwashing, and thought control. And as we've reiterated before, the hunt for control for the perfect human assassin became a huge thing. I mean,
absolutely.
And,
it was just,
are people aware that Salinger had a covert military history and was there at major
let's
battlefronts?
Go back to that again now. Let's go back to J D Salinger. He was at the D-Day invasion of Normandy.
He was there when Dachau was liberated.
That's right. So he really got to see some really major.
He made statements to his daughter Margaret that you can never ever entirely get the smell of rotting flesh out of your nostrils.
Well, no, you can't. Once you've smelled that, it's
the process.
Always there.
I used to.
Solitary. He had Defense Department shenanigans going on with him, I'd say. He did end up in a psych ward for a while.
He had what was called battle fatigue,
which was post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yep.
Yep.
But not just that, he actually he ended up doing a whole year, or was it 6 months, of what they call denazification. So he was an interrogation officer.
There's another
during
really
that and his relationships, we really have to check out. That's just where I think that this book is entirely autobiographical and introspectively it may have hit Salinger at some point that he'd released too much information to the public, primarily about himself, but maybe also about the techniques being used covertly for the control of the human mind.
That's right. So the denazification thing was he ended up in Germany and he was interrogating.
He was denazifying them.
Well, I don't know. How do you denazify someone?
But during that, he did the same thing that Lee Harvey Oswald do with the Marina, which is bizarre.
He brought back a Nazi girl back into the country,
there was
America.
One of the people there that was being denazified.
Well,
how can you do that unless she was a paperclip?
Well, who knows? And he married her, didn't he? Yeah, he ended up marrying her. So
and she was a young lass too.
She was a young lass. And
lots of them young lasses.
Well, they were all young lasses.
Let's get a little bit of background.
He got older, but the girls that he ended up with always stayed the same age.
And that's why the book could be some sort of literary lure. And we're not saying that it is, but we're saying there's some great supportive evidence, especially when you get to Joyce Maynard, who was the 18-year-old who was writing for 17 magazine, just had an astounding article for the New Yorker. And I think he was 58 years of age. She was 18. And he wrote to her and she was about to go places in the literary world.
That's right.
And she ended up 9 months in a relationship with him and literally lost a lot of that
just,
speed and kudos that she was building up to.
Yeah.
Let's just check out an astounding documentary because, as I said, 1965, this man closed the doors on the world. Went to New Hampshire, but evidently it could be seen in the bar there chatting up a few women.
So it's 1979. I get an assignment from Newsweek magazine to photograph this author. He doesn't like to be photographed, but we do know he picks up his mail in Windsor, Vermont. So I waited. And then this Jeep pulls up, and he gets out, and he goes into the post office really quickly. And then as he came back out, I got it. I got Salinger.
The publication of Catcher in the Rye in 1951 was a revolution. There had not been a voice like that.
When you're a kid and you read Catcher in the Rye, you're just like, oh my God, somebody gets it.
I remember that being the first book you take with you.
It is a phenomenon. How many millions and millions came to that book?
The great mystery is why he stopped.
Salinger was a national story, a shooting star.
At the height of that success, he disappears. He became the Howard Hughes of his day.
Mystery. We all like a mystery.
The Second World War created J D Salinger.
There was a lot of mystery about what he did in the Army. Very few people have seen as much death.
Salinger suffered a nervous breakdown.
He's got this concrete bunker where he works.
He has a very fanatical readership.
If one person used something I had written as their justification for killing somebody, I'd say, God, people are crazy.
I was literally living inside of J D Salinger's A Catcher in the Rye.
But if 3 people used something I had written as justification, I would be very, very troubled by it.
He wanted nothing to come between him and his characters. They were real to him. He moved them about the stage like God.
You cannot dismiss the issues of his private life.
People heard him, people he trusted.
He said, "You have ruined my life."
I saw 2 manuscripts.
What's in that vault?
Someone cracks that code, man. It's going to be the story of the century.
Writing a book is a horrible, exhausting struggle. One would never undertake such a thing if one were not driven by some demon. And he had demons.
Yeah, we just left that moment there. You see I'm wearing the Salinger cover today, but we left that moment there for you to pause and think about. That's an extraordinary documentary. Took millions of dollars, years to be done.
And Harvey wants to.
Well, it's a bit like Jandek, isn't it?
It
the
is.
search for Jandek. You spend all this time. What do? You get a telephoto shot of Salinger, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Picking up the mail. And still didn't resolve many, many issues.
No, probably brought up more questions.
Is J D Salinger? Well, J D Salinger, as per se, was writing short stories for many, many years in the 40s that were going nowhere fast. No, just wait. That were going nowhere fast. He was critically acclaimed for A Perfect Day for Banana Fish in 1948. And the success of The Catcher in the Rye led to so much scrutiny and people trying to find him that's when he became the recluse.
Right.
But I think he might have realized, I've got a few things I need to hide and people are getting too close to this secret. Why do you become a recluse? Because you're hiding something.
Well, clearly.
So I suggest that you look at the 2 books, the 2 bios, one by Joyce Maynard, a writer for 17 in the New Yorker, and the daughter Margaret Salinger. And even though Matt, who has control of the family jewels and those suspected novels Salinger was writing.
Well, he was saying he was going to.
He never stopped writing, did he?
Yeah, no, he didn't. He didn't. But he also never published any of it. So
you know what Joyce Maynard suspected? That he would wake up in the morning and go in early and start writing for a couple of hours. It was over by lunchtime. He didn't have the chops of J.G. Ballard, who'd spend the whole day writing.
Yeah.
she suspects that he might have been not writing novels at all.
What was he writing?
That he was writing luring letters to young ladies.
Girls.
Yeah, and grooming them.
Yeah.
So he could catch them.
In the rye.
Yeah, before. You've got a really good point there. Now, his father was born in Manhattan, New York. His father traded in kosher cheese.
Yeah, right. He made his fortune there.
Yeah, the real breeding, He enrolled initially in the Valley Forth. His parents put him into this, the Valley Forth Military Academy in Pennsylvania. That's where he started writing his war stories. But the other thing is,
what?
It's one of their worst, most mediocre students.
It was.
He wasn't. Make sense.
He wasn't an exceptional writer from the beginning.
The other thing we have to consider, very early in the piece, he started dating these younger women. One of them was Ona O'Neill, who turned out to be the daughter of the playwright Eugene O'Neill. So there was there seemed to be a motive there in the dating, that he can link up with someone that will help him.
Yeah.
That all falls to bits because Charlie Chaplin grabbed her.
Oh, right. Yeah, he did.
And
That's
he
right.
had a little bit of the Salinger fault line running through him too.
Young girls.
Now, Holden Caulfield in 1941 appeared as a character in the Slight Rebellion off Madison. So there was this weird sort of Da Vinci Code serialization of all his work.
Yeah.
And you'd be aware of the Glass family,
That's
which
right.
started to appear in chapters, sequelized.
Yeah.
You had to bring the books together.
Yeah.
But if you're a reader of Salinger's, you'd start to get excited because you'd see characters starting to link up
in all these other
books.
short stories. No, short stories, not other books. They
It's
were
a bit
short
Da Vinci
stories.
Code.
Yeah, he's a weird one. He's a weird one. Anyway.
Yeah. The chapter of gentlemen that he joined during the Second World War, the counterintelligence team needs lots more investigation.
Yeah.
They were called the Ritchie Boys.
Okay.
And it was because he was bilingual. He had German down and stuff like that.
Right.
But very odd. Very, very odd. And, the other thing he did, which is really strange, and is a harbinger of the world to come, and really early in the piece, is, and I think it might have been due to the horrors of the war, but it was really early. It might have even been before that. He dumped eating meat. He became a follower of Zen Buddhism.
Yeah.
He even dabbled in Dianetics, went and met Ron Hubbard and walked away from him going, what is going on there? But it's just a very strange thing. Okay, so 1955, 36 years of age, he married one of the students, insisted that she drop out of school.
Yeah.
And she was 4 months shy of graduation.
Right.
So there's this bit of this crazy history. 1972, age 53, 18-year-old Joyce Maynard.
Yeah, right.
So
he's getting
lots
older,
of affairs.
but the girls that he's going after are staying that late teens, 17, 18, 19.
And it feels like too, and excuse me, with all due respect to living family members and friends, it feels like once they reach a certain point, they're used by date.
Well, they're too old.
Their numbers were up.
Except he doesn't look in the mirror and see himself that he can be their grandfather.
So it's really,
morons.
was this guy exposed to something like the story of Frank Olson there, the microbiologist who fell out of New York?
Fell out. I think he was pushed.
It sounds like he was pushed, because all of them, Sidney Gottlieb is, the story allegedly goes that Gottlieb, who was experimenting with LSD-25, the fungus that grows on rye, had actually given Frank, and Frank was already horrified by their
the use of his
their techniques in Europe of interrogation.
Yes.
Something that Salinger was doing in the denazification.
Yeah.
It looks like Gottlieb might have slipped him a little bit of that LSD that took him to the brink of mental collapse.
Sure.
And he was starting to question his role in the military. And so the best thing to do was give him the fastest exit out of that building without an elevator, which was a window.
The window.
Really frightening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We were talking about Olsen then, weren't we?
We were. But there is a reference. There's a link there, and it's really worth taking a look at Olsen. But what we can't avoid, and what Matt, the brother who's in charge of publishing the work that has been vaulted, the Sun, sorry,
that's right.
jumping all over the place. My apologies.
Matt Salinger, Matthew.
We have to acknowledge that this book has been linked in some of the most atrocious crimes and murders of the 20th century.
And they were not atrocious, but really weird crimes, really weird ones, because when they've been caught, there's always been the catching of these, assassins, because they were assassins, was really bizarre. It made no sense. There was stuff missing. There was, they were saying things that were really crazy. So the conspiracies of the Catcher in the Rye that's been linked to are
well, the John Lennon, 1980, the murder there with Mark David Chapman.
Yeah, that was the big one.
And that is the big one, because he actually had the Catcher in the Rye in his hands when the police came. He didn't resist arrest.
No.
He was reading from it. That day, he'd written in the book, I am Holden Caulfield.
Yes.
And over-identified. Everyone said he was a huge fan of the Beatles, not whatsoever.
He wasn't.
More interested
Never
in
owned, was not interested.
Todd Rundgren's work, I think.
Wasn't interested in the Beatles whatsoever. So his motivation to kill John Lennon, it just makes no sense.
And you know what? There is an astounding book. And we need to track this author down. We actually tried to get Joyce Maynard. We sent out a couple of emails and they weren't responded to. But David Wheelhand and Mind Game shows you there was no investigation.
None at all.
Because Mr. Chapman here had actually fessed up. And, the case was closed instantly the moment it was opened.
Yeah, he's confessed, so let's not investigate at all. Which they're supposed to. They're actually supposed to investigate and prove, because it doesn't matter what.
Such a high-profile case.
Because,
and with the challenge to John Lennon with internal intelligence in the US.
They hated him. What's his name? Hoover wanted him out of there.
Out of there.
He hated John Lennon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, the Mark Chapman, the whole scenario of how he was murdered and how he murdered it, how he shot him and stuff, none of it makes any sense.
Let's get a little bit of background.
As one of the Beatles, John Lennon became world famous. After the band broke up, he used his fame to speak out against the war in Vietnam and war in general. Lennon's wit made him one of the most quotable peace activists of the time. His lover and partner, avant-garde artist Yoko Ono, encouraged gimmicks like a bed-in for peace. The FBI challenged his legal status in the U.S. as a resident alien, had the IRS probe his tax returns, and kept him under surveillance. Gradually tiring of the limelight, Lennon withdrew for several years. He, Yoko, and their infant son Sean lived on a vast manor in upstate New York. A young man named Mark David Chapman had been a fan. When he read an article implying Lennon lived the cushy life of a millionaire instead of protesting for peace, Chapman felt betrayed. Depressed and obsessed, Chapman left his Asian wife in Hawaii and flew to New York. For days he haunted Central Park, mimicking the actions of Holden Caulfield, teenage hero of the novel Catcher in the Rye. In the forecourt of the Dakota Apartments, Chapman shot Lennon several times, watching him die as Yoko screamed. Chapman then sat down and read Catcher in the Rye until police arrested him. Chapman was obviously mentally unbalanced. He felt he was acting out a preordained plan. But as with most 20th century assassins, Chapman is connected to the mysterious world of espionage. Author Fenton Bressler discovered that Chapman had trained as a security guard in Beirut and later worked in a refugee camp in Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, under the auspices of World Vision, a missionary organization funded by the CIA. In Hawaii, Chapman again stayed in a camp sponsored by World Vision. It could be just an odd coincidence, but in any case, one more voice for peace was silenced.
And we haven't even got to dinner time yet, and I can't wait, I just can't wait. I'm so glad to be around.
Very sad there to hear the words of John Lennon, no matter what you think about his music and his creativity, that was a tragic moment for the world, and by a gentleman that doesn't appear to have actually even find the murder weapon. So have a look at that David Willem book. Here, I think, is what we saw with Lee Harvey Oswald just prior to the assassination of Kennedy, the painting of the witness.
Yes.
Because this is an odd piece, and I don't believe this was going to happen, but how many people are aware there was a link also to David Bowie in the most profound way? Because
in a weird way.
He was in New York City doing the stage adaptation of The Elephant Man. Of course, David Lynch had done that profound film later on with John Hurt.
He'd been invited to play the lead in The Elephant Man.
But it was a
stage production in New York in the Booth Theatre. So this is the end of 1980. So it's coming up to the 8th of December. Mark David Chapman flew into town intending to kill Lennon because he thought he was a phony. He also thought he might have a pop at Bowie and bought tickets to The Elephant Man, just in case, for some reason, he couldn't get Lennon. On the night of the 8th, he killed him. On the night of the 9th, there were 3 empty seats in the Booth Theatre, and they would have been John, Yoko and Mark Chapman.
And Bowie decided to go on stage that night.
He played the empty seats. He was clearly traumatised, but he did it. After the assassination, he realised there was an Elephant Man program in Chapman's hotel room that the police found, and Bowie's name was ringed in black, and it chilled him to the bone.
Quite amazing. The Booth Theatre, was that where Lincoln was shot?
No, it wasn't.
I'd like to know with those seating arrangements, you know what would be the wildest thing?
If all the 3 seats were all together.
And in between Yoko and John
was Chapman. Yeah.
I'm not laughing about this.
No,
You've just got to do with a bit of gallows humour.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, let's go to be prepared for this. This is Mark David Chapman himself.
Welcome back to Larry King Live with Mark David Chapman. Mark, will you relive with us those terrible moments for you, for the world, for a lot of people around and in circles close to John Lennon? What happened that night?
Well, if you want to pick it up from the night, I was standing there with a gun in my pocket.
Knew you were going to shoot him?
Sorry?
Knew you were going to shoot him?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Tried not to, praying not to, but knowing down deep it was probably going to come to that.
Did you know it would be that night? Did you know you would see him again?
Yes, I knew that morning, oddly, when I left the hotel, I had some type of premonition that this was the last time I was going to leave my hotel room. I hadn't seen him up to that point. That's what makes it interesting. I wasn't even sure he was in the building. And then I left the hotel room, bought a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, signed it to Holden Caulfield from Holden Caulfield, and wrote underneath that, "This is my statement," underlining the word "this," the emphasis on the word "this." I had planned not to say anything after the shooting. Walked briskly up.
So we won't go into the gory details there, but there you go. I mean,
how does Larry King get Chapman? I mean, how many assassins of really famous people get to go on television?
It's a shocking
to be interviewed.
Thing.
That's a really, who organised that and why?
And there
why
is Larry King stealing John Nebel's thunder,
there,
you know.
But why would they allow him to go on television to talk about the assassination? Why do they not do it with every single
But when it comes
just
to
weird.
The Catcher in the Rye, this murder in December 8th, 1980, is the sine qua non for, is this a trigger?
Right.
Is this a primer?
Yeah.
Used by sleeper assassins? You know, the fact that he was so evidently obsessed with Catcher in the Rye, kept buying that book, it really makes you wonder. And then along comes...
Why?
Well, Jerry, you've got a dozen copies of this book.
I know. Yeah, I know. There's more of them in here. under the bed too. I don't know why, but whenever I see one, I have to buy it. And if I don't see one, well, then I have to find one to buy so that I feel normal. Oh. I don't know why. Did you ever read it?
Yeah, you read this in school.
No one ever gave it to me to read at school. That's what they start when you're young, you know. When you're little, they get at school, they Baden Powell all the boys, and they Betty Crocker all the girls, and they air condition you. They put you in an easy bake oven, and you can't breathe anymore.
No.
We're all in that easy bake oven. You know, the weirdest thing with Chapman in a way and signing that book as Holden Caulfield is that he did similar things to Holden's character in the book. They both hung out in Central Park. The Dakota was across the street. They both flunked out of school. They both had distant, absent parents with abusive fathers.
Yeah.
One thing about Mark, father, Air Force officer.
Yeah.
Again, that military background that we hear with Dave McGowan in Program to Kill all the time.
Yeah.
They both met up with call girls and then didn't consummate the deal.
Yeah.
Chapman offered a cab driver cocaine. Holden offered someone in the park a drink. A cab driver a drink. Chapman worked to rescue children. Caulfield worked to save children. Chapman, Lennon is a phony, hates phonies.
I think there were bigger phonies than Lennon back then. It's like, why
Totally.
Lennon, of all people? That's bizarre.
It's really bizarre. Anyway, it's just, there's all these incredible similarities. And when you read the book and look at it in popular culture, it is so bizarre. Popular culture is...
Okay, kids, let's take our seats. There has been a change in school policy, and so I'm assigning you all a book to read.
A book? God, I hate those.
Now, kids, this book is very controversial and has just been taken off the banned books list.
Oh, really? Sweet.
It's called Catcher in the Rye, and it has some very risque parts.
All right.
And strong, vulgar language. And in fact, many schools across the country still ban this book because it's thought to be so inappropriate.
Oh, man, I can't wait.
Tonight, I want you to read chapters 1 through 5, and tomorrow we'll discuss the...
No, come on, let's read it now. Mr. Garrison, didn't the guy who shot John Lennon say it was because of this book?
Yes, apparently John Lennon's killer said he was inspired by Catcher in the Rye, but he was just a kook.
Whoa, you're telling us this book is filthy, inappropriate, and made a guy shoot the king of hippies? Can we please read this right now?
You will read it.
So, of course, you know, anything that's worthwhile
that's
has to be referenced by
Absolutely.
South Park,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
And it says in all, written by the king of the hippies.
Yeah.
I just love that.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is instrumental in that, but it was also instrumental 9 years later in the death of the 21-year-old Rebecca Schaefer, who was an actress by Robert John Bardot, you know, and his father was an Air Force officer that worked at all places, Aspasia, Edwards Air Force Base.
Right, okay, there you go.
So, you know, this was a tragic murder, and in many ways, this was entirely similar to the modus operandi, to the point the journalists were writing at the time, they believed that Robert John Bardot was a copycat killer.
Yeah.
Because as Chapman had gone to the Dakota and met John first and got him to sign Double Fantasy.
Yeah.
So had Robert Bardot gone to the flat, spoken to her, and then came back a second time.
Yeah, to do the deed.
So it is so odd in that regard.
And was telling everybody, like making sure that everybody had seen him, was telling people.
He was walking around like Lee Harvey Oswald was on 4th Street
going, here
down
I
in
am,
New Orleans,
I'm
going,
so-and-so.
I'm a card-carrying communist.
Yeah, right.
They're all going, do you know this girl? But he'd already been to the building. Do you know where she lives?
Yeah, he was showing her photo, her picture, and asking people if they knew where she lived. Yet he'd already been to the building.
You know what,
and
Sue?
knew where she lived.
They both used the same gun, a .38 Charter revolver.
Wow, you know,
so
people
that
just
is
say that's
odd
a
in itself,
coincidence.
isn't it?
Well, of all the guns,
Yeah.
of all the guns in all the...
Look,
yeah.
I think if people really need to go, is there some veracity to this? Look at a book that took 20 years to be written.
I know.
And you'll realize that there is a lot of veracity to the notion of the search for control of the human mind.
Oh, for sure.
And they were trying everything possible, from that fungus on the rye to maybe
LSD-25,
neuro-linguistic programming.
Well,
you know, and they're
or
interesting,
just all
curious.
of them all together, you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't really wish to actually spend much time there. You know, people have stated that Lee Harvey Oswald had a copy of Catcher in the Rye. One of the most other notorious people was in 1981, the attempt on Reagan's life by John Hinckley Jr.
That's right.
Who's been released and does some astounding music. Look him up on YouTube.
Yeah, right.
It's really odd.
Isn't there somebody you have to go through to get to him or something? No?
That's another thing that I didn't want to step onto was the Japanese girlfriends, wives involved with Mark David Chapman.
Yeah.
With, I mean, Yoko, of course, there. And there's some odd things about Yoko's history. There's that time when she passed the PA
the film
on.
she made in the 60s, Satan's Bed. It's not on her IMDb, but she's in that.
She was an avant-garde artist. She came from quite a well-to-do, respected family.
The Fly album is just the most bizarre thing.
One of the most extraordinary. Charlie Sheen used to play that to me endlessly. 20 minutes from a fly roaming.
She's buzzing around as a fly.
Here I am doing a cover of The Fly. But anyway, look, the odd thing is that there was a point there where she actually sanctioned and graced the PA.
Oh, yes, to have an affair with Lennon.
Yeah. And then Lennon went back to her and was put on medication and hypnosis and was a very different person. It just makes you wonder. They're all highly suspect and fascinating, interesting
There's some
moments.
weird stuff going on out there, that's for sure.
You know, this book resonated like not many other books had ever resonated.
Which one?
And
Chaos
No.
Oh, well, take Chaos off the
Chaos should
screen.
resonate. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. But Catcher in the Rye,
Catcher
absolutely.
in the Rye. Go and get a copy of Chaos. 20 years in the making. That is a profound book. Anyway, go back to the moving imagery, please. Thank you.
Back there, yep.
It resonated like another book, which was really odd, was paradoxical. You never think that a book from this failed short story author that was being acclaimed, but not incredibly so, all of a sudden this book explodes.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Here's another book from a horror writer that comes out with the most bizarre, what most of the population would suspect is ridiculous story that he is being visited at night by extraterrestrials.
It wasn't a dream. There's a group that meets.
Group?
People who've seen the same sort of things you have.
Which group of aliens abducted you?
Bob, we are not victims. We are participants.
I don't recall them being human.
I've got to go! My baby's screaming!
You people, you sit there, you're in for one big surprise.
That's a great line. And Christopher Walken does a great job of being Whitley Strieber. And that is an Australian director. Philip Moira did that film in 1989. It's a very underrated film, a great adaptation of Communion. And I want people to realise Whitley Strieber's still alive in his late 70s.
Yeah.
And Whitley has done a reissue of that book.
Right.
That caused shockwaves in its day.
Yeah, but didn't inspire anybody to kill someone else.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is a very odd book to get one of the largest pre-publishing deals.
Absolutely.
They are aware what sits in the subconscious of humanity. When I say they, I've got no idea who they are. But,
but they are out there.
They are aware. And this is another oddity.
Yeah.
And what I was saying
he got $1 million publishing.
Got a huge pre-publishing deal. Yeah. How come they didn't think, this is ridiculous? Everyone's going to think this guy's lying.
Yeah, who's going to believe?
The amount of people that were triggered by that cover image.
Yeah, that was
and
a trigger.
they did a pre-publicity campaign for months worldwide where all they had was that face.
We've got one of those big
not even the words
posters.
Communion.
Yeah, just
and it was triggering people.
All over the place.
All right.
Okay.
Go into Costco, you'd see that cover and you'd collapse on the floor and realise my entire life I've been abducted
probed.
late at night. Yep.
I've been probed.
Anyway, that's in an allegorical sense. I'm taking it to Catcher in the Rye. Now, Catcher in the Rye to me could have been nothing more than a thinly disguised autobiography. And as I stated before, Salinger has let no one ever take the rights and adapt it into a play or a film.
He actually said the only person that could play Caulfield was himself. Yet he would have been too old.
2020, Disney decides they're going to do an animated version.
Oh, God.
They're going to change it slightly. I think they're going to call it Doofus. And it's going to be
Doofus.
It's all going to be done with dogs. Alsatians, best friends. What's going on there? Anyway, that project was closed down as soon as it was even considered.
Yeah, right. Oh, my God. Yeah. It's weird that actually this book that was, that everyone's read that's gone through school was actually never turned into a film.
He won't let it happen. He said that and this is what the point I was getting to about it being biographical, he was the only person that could ever be cast in the role of Holden Caulfield.
Did I just say that?
Yeah, you did, actually. I'm doubling up here. Where else?
And that's why he wouldn't.
We're repeating these words like goddamn, the blasphemy, the vulgar nature of everything.
Oh, my God.
Just let me get to that bit in my notes.
Which one? Oh,
where
right.
People actually stated about all the... Okay.
The amount of times?
Well, the trouble with the book. Vulgar language, sexual references, blasphemy, undermining family values, moral codes, the encouragement of rebellion, the promotion of drinking, smoking, lying, promiscuity, and sexual abuse. Wow,
and that's
what a novel to embrace.
And this is what I'm saying.
Population.
Why? Who in the school syllabus, on all the Western school syllabuses,
I read it
decided that this was a good book to hand to a kid in school.
Yeah.
To a teenager.
So maybe if Salinger was luring young people, and this is getting back to Joyce Maynard and what she suspected, if I can digress there.
Yeah.
She suspected that when he did those, was he actually writing books, or was he writing just luring love letters?
Whoa.
And so did he go, if I don't shut this thing down, become a recluse, become the ultimate enigma, the
before
riddle.
cancelling even comes in.
Yeah. That's a good point.
There you go.
Let's go to his death.
Okay.
He was one of the most influential figures in 20th century literature and perhaps the most reclusive. These are almost the only pictures of the man who both shocked and inspired the world with his 1951 masterpiece, The Catcher in the Rye. The tale of teenage alienation and rebellion captivated young readers everywhere. Its famous first words are etched in literary history.
If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born, what my lousy childhood was like, and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me, and all that David Copperfield kind of crap.
Nearly 6 decades later, The Catcher in the Rye still sells more than 200,000 copies a year.
I remember really being I think I was probably 11 or 12, really kind of identifying with that hero and thinking, break out of the mold here.
For others, the book carried dark undertones. Crazed Beatle fan Mark David Chapman cited Salinger's novel as his inspiration for killing John Lennon. The author himself struggled with the cult-like status of the book. He lived in self-imposed isolation in a remote New Hampshire town. J D Salinger hadn't published a work since 1965 and rarely gave interviews.
You know, we're in an age where the writer has to function as celebrity, is getting up and doing the book tour, talking about things, lecturing. And Salinger's rejection of that makes him a really fascinating figure.
It's a fascination that'll be heightened by his death. Michael Rowland, ABC News.
Well, thank you, Michael Rowland. Thank you to the Australian Broadcasting Commission there to give us the Australian exit point for Salinger off this mortal coil.
Yeah.
You have been on Untold Radio. We are down south Anomalies. We need to stick to our continental equatorial borders, and we can't, because we've been fascinated by that book from day one.
It was part of our worldview down here.
So our hypothesis,
everywhere.
which we believe is unique unto ourselves, but inspired by the occult rejects, and numerous other people out there, Ramsey and Dana and all sorts of people.
Yeah.
Our perspective is that he hadn't written this book. He had no idea it was going to be embraced on that level.
No.
He was probably, as a writer, unsure he could ever write anything the same, a bit like Answered Prayers with Truman Capote.
Well,
and also, if people actually spent time analysing his work, where it looks like they were doing, they might realise that this is the greatest grooming process that has ever gone out there. And what is considered to be a critically acclaimed, breaking a whole new level in whimsical. I mean, the Holden Caulfield character, it's stream of consciousness. The narrative is a complete mess.
Yeah.
Why was it embraced? Why is it still being
I want to
embraced
know
today?
who put it on. I think if you find out who put it on the school syllabus to be read in schools, that's where the answer lies.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I think we've done the best we can with what we've got there. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope we haven't completely reconfigured your thinking.
I doubt if we have.
Yeah. And as per se, it's always a joy to be with you here. I love
It's
you
always
deeply.
a joy to be with everybody here.
Yeah, it is. I mean, our supporters are extraordinary.
They are.
And our friends. So I hope for once we've sort of, stepped to the sideline with...
Oh, we so stepped on the sideline here.
Okay.
Gone so left of centre.
We'll catch you next week with another hopefully fascinating and interesting show. Take good care.
Well, it is fascinating and interesting for us because we learn so much.
Be careful what you read. Be careful what you consider. And just make sure you have a look into the world of being kind and loving, because the moment that you embrace that, well, you've got everything.
It's all good. Okay, bye.